I really love wooden windows, especially double hung windows like you see here, but finishing them and refinishing them can be a real pain. I'm Steve Maxwell, technical editor for Canadian Home Workshop magazine, and I want to show you the system I've come up with for shortening the window refinishing time as much as possible and having that new paint job last a long, long time. The first part of the process, of course, involves stripping off the old finish. I used a product called Cetol 1 on these windows back in 1989 when I first finished them, and sanding is the best way to remove that finish. If you've got thick coats of old paint, then you might want to try some chemical stripping or some infrared heat stripping. In my case, I start with the 5-inch random orbit sander that I use over the largest, flattest areas of the sash, and then I switch to this cordless detail sander for doing the rounded edges of the frame wherever it meets the glass. Based on what I've learned as I watch these windows age, I'm going to change my finishing strategy a little bit. I'm going to use Cetol number 1 followed by a coat of Cetol 2-3 for the interior surfaces of the window. On the outside, I'm going to use a traditional linseed oil paint that you probably haven't heard of before. I like it because it doesn't peel, it just simply wears out slowly over time. It's really easy to reestablish a coat of new paint over the old. Now, the challenge is applying it though. It's not that easy to get along with, and I want to show you a few tricks for using this unusual but long-lasting paint properly. This is probably the simplest paint in the world. It's made with nothing more than organically grown, boiled, cold-pressed linseed oil, some pigment, and a small amount of drying agent. There's actually no solvent to evaporate from this paint. It simply hardens by chemical reaction with the air. Now, that said, the pigment settles out so tenaciously. I think it's almost impossible to mix the pigment back in, even after the paint has sat for just a week or so. So that's why I use an electric drill with my dirty, useless 1.5-inch diameter spade bit to stir it up. You can also have this paint shaken if you want to take it to the hardware store. I've had that work fine, but like I said, it settles out so quickly that it's handy to have a system to use right in your own shop. One of the things that makes this paint last so long without peeling is that the linseed part of it actually soaks into the wood and bonds there. Now, when you're dealing with old wood, like I am here, it's recommended that you coat that wood with their special protein-free boiled linseed oil. And I've already done that, and that oil has cured, and now I'm on to the painting. This paint does not dry very fast, which means that it's very run prone. And to avoid problems with runs, you need to apply the paint absolutely as thin as possible. So you put some on and then you just keep working it back and forth until you really can't put any more on without dipping back into the can. Now, you might think that this doesn't really matter with horizontal surfaces, but that's not true, because if any of this paint pools on the surface as it cures, it will turn crinkly and look pretty ugly. The last troublesome thing you need to know about this paint is that it tends to gather a lot of dust, even if your shop is clean. That's because it stays wet so long. As you can see here, the surface is fairly bumpy after that first coat. Let it dry for at least 24 hours. I prefer 2 full days, and then gently go over the surface with this 3M rubbing pad, vacuum it all off, and then finish up with one final coat spread even more thinly than the first coat. After that's dried for a couple of days, you're all set to go, and you won't ever have to deal with peeling and scraping again when it comes time to finish those window sashes.